Happy New Year. It's me, we're back here at Ancestor House. We've been away, took a little vacation, we did some reruns, but now we're back face to face with you at home. And I want to thank you for being here with us, with me, Nana Camille Yarbrough. While we were away, I did an event at the Schomberg Library, the Schomberg Center for Black Culture in Harlem, 135th Street. I wanted to give focus to a brother who is joining the other historians, joining those others who study our culture, who bring it to us in a dignified way, and who enlighten us so that we can take our place again on the, as Dr. Clark says, on the world stage. That was Brother Dr. Runoko Rashidi. And so today we're going to see some of what happened that evening. It isn't as smooth as I would have liked it, but that's okay. You'll get the essence of it. You'll see him, you'll see Dr. Jeffries, you'll see Professor James Small, you'll see the brother who so graciously they gave the musicians, Atiba Wilson, who gave, and Aqua, who gave their time. So I'm not going to say much. I want to come inside, and you won't see the complete tape today. We'll show next week. We'll have more of it. But come on inside. You are at Ancestor House. This is your house. This is our house. So come on inside and meet our guest and meet Dr. Runoko Rashidi. Okay? Come on in.
Learn and tell our story, heal the pain and raise the glory. Tell it. We must learn and tell our story, heal the pain and raise the glory. Tell it. Not to know the family story is bad. Not to want to know it is worse. For to pass on ignorance to someone is like, it's like passing on a curse. And it will curse your father, curse your mother, curse your sister, curse your brother. And every time you come close to one another, it will be there in between to separate and instigate. We must learn and tell our story.
Yes, we must learn and tell our family story. We, people of African ancestry, must learn and tell it for ourselves. No one else can learn and tell it for us. There are those who have studied and who can talk about it, but we are the ones who live it. And so here at Ancestor House, we always open the story by using the force of water, which refreshes, the force of the fire that comes from our spirit and our energy, which ignites the story. And when we are outside, we pour the water into earth, which helps our story to grow more. And so we have this earth, wind, fire, and water. First, omani abad. Let the wisdom and the power of our ancestors come and be with us today as we tell the story of our people. There is so much to say. Some of it is heartbreaking, and much of it is an inspirational story. And so we say, first we thank the Mighty One. We thank the one that made us all, that gave us our first dignity as the parents of humanity. Do you understand what that means? That means we, people of Africa, what's called Africa now, are the mothers and fathers of all others. All others came from us after they left their home in Africa. For thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, they traveled other places, and we stayed home. And so we have the culture. Other cultures develop, but we have the mother culture. And so we thank those people who stayed, and we thank the wisdom of our ancestors. We thank for their strength. We thank our ancestors who brought us this far. Those who gave so much, they paid so much to bring us this far. They paid with their lives, y'all. They paid with their work. They paid their labor. They paid with every way they could to make things better for us to be this far. There is an Haitian song that I was taught when I was a member of the Catherine Dunham Dance Company. It speaks of asking the deity at that time, at their place, to watch, to see how far we have come. I think it starts on Nago, Nago, Vinwe Kotem Dimwe. You see how we're moving now. Vinwe Kotem Dimwe, Fopa Yela Jamposa, Nago, Nago, Vinwe Kotem Dimwe. Then it goes on to say, Vinwe Kotem Dimwe, Vinwe Kotem Bambule, Vinwe Kotem Bambushe, Fopa Yela Jamposa. No matter how far we have traveled, we should not forget the price we paid to come this far. And let that inspire us to go even further. And so I thank our ancestors for all of their sacrifices. Yao, 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 Yao. And we must remember that there are those who do not want us to take again the place, our place in the world. And they plot and plan against us doing so. And we say, let their plotting and planning go back to them and not come to us. Yao, Ashe. Thank you for being here with us today. And now, we're going to go to a DVD showing what happened at the Schomberg Library. It's, as I said, it's a little stretched out, but I hope you will enjoy it. It's telling our story. So I'll see you after the DVD. Enjoy.
I attended a forum on the importance of ritual. We got to reconnect with our rituals. We got to reconnect them just on GP. Never let our opportunity go to salute our ancestors. To salute them. Because that's what it was about. That's why I had to be very clear about it. That it wasn't about clapping for anything that I played, but for us standing up for us. Because that's what we're here for, right? Yes. That's what we're here for. So the ritual is a part. The musicians have always been, the culture has always been a part of that, calling us, you know, to the front. Okay, here we are. This is where we're gonna hook up. This is what we're gonna, now we're gonna do this other thing next. But the musicians, you know, it's the rallying cry. So we gotta, and more than ever, we need rallying cries, and we need to recognize them. Those of us who recognize it, we gotta stand, because others won't know. So, you know, we get to taking it for granted. Oh, everybody knows. Oh, that's just such. We can't take it for granted. We see what taking it for granted is doing. Our youngsters are out there walking around with their pants around their ankles, and some of those folks ain't young. So obviously, we got to stand up a little bit more often. We got to recognize, those of us who come into these, we got to recognize on GP, and we got to make sure that we spread the word. That's what ritual is about, reconnecting. Ritual is always about reconnecting to ancestors, to what works for us. To what works for us. What's in our interest. Thank you.
Peace, family. How's everybody feeling this afternoon? I hope wonderful. I hope you feel as good as you look. I'm April Silver. I just wanted to, on behalf of Nana Camille, just say that we're going to be starting the program. I wanted to Oh, the musicians, our musicians, they're welcome to come back to the stage. I was going to ask you all to, at the request of Nana Camille, to lift up our space and our energy and clear the path with drumming. I know that you've been playing for some time, but you all know Nana Camille Yarbrough, yes? You all know how she feels about the drum, yes? So if we can ask our musicians if they can hear me to come back. Are they? Thank you, thank you. Yes, please, please welcome them back. Just before we bring her to the stage, we just wanted to clear the space in an even more official capacity. And let me do this, because this was one part that was out of the program. Even though the presentation of who Nana Camille Yarbrough is on the back of your program, I'd like us just to give her a round of applause for her vision, for her tenacity, for her diligence. Despite all odds, she has been diligent about trying to make this happen for the community as a gift, you know, of her own resources, of her own visions, just because Spirit said so. So can we just lift her up as well? Yes. She is a mentor to so many of us. Her career spans over 50 years, and we are grateful for her vision and for her constantly reminding us that family is first. So.
You can join me. Jolly Adam, Alaleka 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 Jolly
All right. Almost started me dancing back there again. The lamba. It's so good to see you. This is a time of celebration, you know. The other day we celebrated Dr. Leonard Jeffries over at City College. Anybody here who was there? That was tremendous. And we talked about the continuation, although around the country the Black Studies departments are being mowed down and changed. We have to continue that. And this is one of my efforts to continue the passing of our story, the uplifting of our story, by bringing our brother Runoko Rashidi here. Let us, before he comes up, let us give him some for all he has done. All he has done. know, sometimes you get a little disheartened. You say, oh, so many of our great ones have passed on. But as Marcus Garvey said, there are always cubs. There are always those babies who you plant the seed and it grows. You don't think it's going to grow, but it does grow. In this, what is it, beetles who plant their new ones in dung. And even though they are in dung, they find nourishment and grow and then repeat the life. So I want to thank you for being here. I know the subways are not cooperating. That's okay. Let us, please open with a short libation. You know, first we always have to give thanks. Try. Omani aba try. Omani aba try. Let us thank our ancestors. Just think of all the spirits that are in this building. Ooh, the stories of all our great people right here, starting with our brother of Toro Schomberg, who began this with just an idea, a love in his heart. And it has grown to this, and it has grown to be around the world. So first we thank the Mighty One. We thank the Creator who made us all, who gave us our first dignity as the parents of humanity. Can I get a share on that? A share, yow. Then we thank the Creator for giving us our ancestors, those bad ones, those serious ones, those who loved us more than they loved themselves. Yow, ashe, yes. Thank you, ancestors. And I want you here, please, to call out the name of some of your ancestors. Just one, because we want to use this time well. Yow, come on. Yow. Now you're quiet. They can't hear you. Shout, people, shout. Give them that energy. That's what they want to hear. Great-grandma Rebecca, thank you. Come on. Margaret. Thank you. Thank you. Yow. Ooh, we can go on forever. Because the Spirit never left us. The great Creator never left us. Always giving us great ancestors. And so we thank the great Creator. We thank our ancestors. And we must acknowledge that there are those who do not want us to be our true selves, and they work endlessly against us doing so, and we say, let all their plotting and planning go back to them and not come to us, because we are the mothers and fathers of humankind, and we're going to be that. Thank you. I know that all the wonderful things that are going to be said here today will lift us further, will give us strength. The images that we will see will open our visions. I say, Yao, thank you, Creator, for giving us this day. Thank you, Yao. Thank you. We have here a couple of brothers. About, long time ago, 84, I began working at City College, Black Studies department there. And there I met some absolutely marvelous people who were so steeped into our culture. I thought, I was an artist, I was in theater, I was writing, I'd done an album, I'd done books. But when I came there, it was deeper. The roots were really, and that's the first time I went to Africa with Dr. Leonard Jeffries and 40 other people. And so, isn't it something? I mentioned his name and he comes right in the door. Now, what is that? What is that? He must have been waiting outside. And so please come up on the stage, Dr. Jeffries. And beside him, his running buddy, Professor James Small. So let us bring both of them, and they will introduce our guest, Runoko Rashidi. Come on, those steps are short, be careful. There we go. 30 minutes over the bridge.
Get over the bridge.
Thank you.
You're looking beautiful.
Thanks.
Hotel brothers and sisters, let's give our Nana, our Queen Mother, Camille Yarborough, an acknowledgement and round of applause. Is it age before beauty, James?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we're certainly glad to see anything happening in this special space in Harlem, the Schomberg Center. And as most of you know, it's not only historically significant, but for us it's very personal. Our great mentor, Dr. John Henry Clark, is 2 blocks away on 137th Street. That's where he, for so many years, decades, raised the African consciousness and African light. And then across the street is Dr. Ben, his partner. So those 2 brothers really made an enormous contribution to our African knowledge. And they're still doing it. Dr. Clark from the Ancestor realm. Dr. Ben is next month. He'll be 94. So he's still doing his thing. And in an African way, coincidentally, they both have been born in the same 24-hour period. Dr. Ben's birthday is December 31st. Dr. Clark's birthday is January the 1st. So these are wonderful coincidences, but their great contribution in terms of raising the African consciousness and getting us involved is what we have to recognize. Dr. Clark said we had to have an African-centric understanding. We have to see the world where we're centered in it, and we're looking out at the world. And so he taught all of us around the world that that African center was absolutely important. Dr. Ben added that if you can have an African center, but it won't have its enormous true significance unless you take the Nile Valley. And so Dr. Ben started out on his mission. Both of them had what we call the Great and Mighty Walk. He started out on his mission. When I was 1 year old, I was born in 1937. 38, he started moving to the Nile Valley. And over the years, in the 40s and 50s, we started joining him. In the 70s, in large numbers. In the 80s, then we started forming organizations around the scholarship of African civilization, particularly the Nile Valley. So these 2 brothers we are indebted to. One giving us an African view of the world, another saying that special part of the world, the Nile Valley, all thousands of miles of it, is part of our history. Then all of a sudden, Professor Smalls and I are developing the largest Black Studies program in the world at City College. Dr. Turner's doing up at Cornell. Dr. Ron Walters got started at Black Studies in Brandeis. Dr. Asa Hilliard, Dr. Wade Nobles, our great sisters, all doing this great work. We are claiming our African worldview. We're claiming the Nile Valley. And then, lo and behold, a young upstart joins the team and becomes a member of the family. And he decides that we not only have to take America, Africa, he decides we got to take the world. And he starts moving his behind all around the world. He has traveled to more places around the world than anybody I know. So he said it's really African global history. We are a global people. So he's in Mexico, he's in Peru, he's in Turkey, he's in India, he's in Australia. And so we're really blessed to have this young member of the team who's expanded our global reach with his great work. And then he partnered with one of our serious brothers who made an enormous contribution, Professor Ivan Van Sertima, whose base was in Jersey where I am, but he was in Princeton, Rutgers. That's where he did his thing. But then his contribution was we have to institutionalize this. We have to put it in a scholarly institution. He came up with the idea of a journal of African civilization. In 1978, 79, he presented that to us, and us young scholars said, yes, we need it. The older scholars said, we got enough journals. But then Ivan was able to say, not a journal that really centered around African civilization in its fullness. And so he was able to successfully establish the Journal of African Civilization over a period of time. Others joined him. Asa Hilliard was very close to him, Dr. Asa Hilliard, in helping him to produce this work. And another partner of his is our brother, Runoko Rashidi. And they partnered on several publications, including partnering on the Great Nile Valley Civilization Conference that took place in 1984. So you see the family coming together, the sisters and the brothers. And they're not only putting in the scholarly works, and not only putting institutions like the Schomberg, but they're putting it in the community forums that the First World developed. And in 1979, 80, that became the new way of getting this information out into the community. So there were community forums in New York, in Detroit, in Atlanta, in Houston, in San Francisco, in Amsterdam. I've been invited to them in Amsterdam, in Rio de Janeiro. So and every city, major city in England. So this phenomenon, Paris, I go every year to the Paris Forum. So this way of getting this information through the scholars out into the community was very significant. And then our major step was to get it in the curriculum. And so the curriculum inclusion process was developed. Regent Adelaide Sanford got in the middle of that. Dr. Donald Smith. Then they asked me to be a part of it. Then the people got terrorized. If Jeffries is going to be a part of it, oh goodness, what will happen? And we were almost there. We said the curriculum that we have isn't a curriculum of exclusion. What we need is a curriculum of inclusion. What we really need is a curriculum of liberation. But they're not going to let us go that far. We'd have to put that in our homes, in our community organizations, etc. But there's an enormous struggle for the African mind. There's intellectual warfare going on. We've actually won the intellectual warfare, but they're not going to let us enjoy the fruits of victory. That intellectual warfare led by Jacob Carruthers and others, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, and a whole host of our sisters, that intellectual warfare was won when we were able to establish around the great work of Cheikh Anta Diop, supported by others, including Professor Runoko Rashidi. We were able to establish the African origin of humankind, the African evolution of society, and the African cradle of civilization in the Nile Valley and other river valleys. That's the victory. But they're not going to let us take that knowledge and that information and let it empower us wherever we are. But that's the great struggle that continues. And our great fighter, Frederick Douglass, said it best. If there is no struggle, Camille Yarbrough, Nana Camille, there is no progress. No matter how beautiful you look and how spiritual you are, there has to be struggle. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom yet deprecate agitation are men who want the crops without plowing on the ground. They want the rain without the thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, it may be a physical one, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, it never will. So we are indebted to the family for raising us up, and we're indebted to have our brother Runoko Rashidi be so much a part of it. And he's grown so. I was with him in December. One of the greatest moments in my life, 50 years of doing all of this, black folk coming together, conferences. We all met, the African world met in Dakar. Brazil sent 450. Martinique, little island Martinique, sent 50. And Africans from America were full participants. And this great minds of people and all around the world was opened up, I think it was like December the 10th. And who was the young scholar who opened it up? Our brother Runoko Rashidi. And he opened it up because the first day the theme was the ancient African diaspora. Not the one that we're used to coming out of enslavement, but the ancient African diaspora. And he actually traveled around the world, bringing in people. He brought a brother from one of the islands wearing his feathered crown, and so emotionally attached to us because the struggle continues for them in the islands, the Pacific Islands. He brought a young lady from Turkey, who at first we looked at her and she was highly unmelanized, and we were wondering where was her African connection. But then when Runoko showed the pictures of her grandmother, her aunties, her family, you could see this was the African family in Turkey. So Runoko was the superstar opening up that conference. And then, you know, I was glad for him. The president of Senegal grabbed out of his briefcase a book and held it up. This is Runoko's book. I got it off the internet. Now, that's most unusual. In an international conference, the president saying, I got it off the internet. But what was most unusual and historic was after the presentation by Runoko, which was outstanding to initiate this process, the president got a note from his aide-de-camp that said, another president is arriving at the airport in Dakar, and you have to leave in order to greet this president. And so the president is used to doing that, but what he did after that was most unusual and absolutely historic. he announced to us that he would like this scholar from America, Runoko Rashidi, to sit in his seat and preside over the whole forum of great intellectuals that had come together. And I was a little nervous because Runoko has a chance, you know, he don't like to puff himself up and he likes to move back. And I said, will he be able to step up? He took a deep breath and walked up in there and sat in there and chaired that international forum. A great moment for Runoko, a great moment for all of us. Runoko Rashidi, my contribution to the intro.
Thank you, Dr. J. Runoko and I go back about the same length of time as Dr. Jeffrey, so I want to read what you have in your flyer and then introduce him and bring him to the stage. A profile of a Pan-Africanist scholar. Dr. Runoko Rashidi is a historian, research specialist, writer, and lecturer. He's also author of Introduction to the Study of African Classical Civilization. He edited with Dr. Ivan van Sertima, The African Presence in Early Asia. He also authored The Global African Community, The African Presence in Asia, Australia, and the South Pacific, and Black Star, The African Presence in Early Europe. African scholars that Runoko has worked with and been influenced by include John Henry Clark, John G. Jackson, Joseph Benyakinen, Chancellor James Williams, Charles B. Cooper, Edward Vivian Scobie, Ivan van Sertima, Asa G. Hilliard III, Karen Ann Johnsons, Obed E. Williams, Charles S. Finch, James E. Bronson, Wayne B. Chandler, LeGrand H. Clegg, and Jan Carew. In the media, he has been interviewed on hundreds of radio and TV programs. He has lectured in over 50 countries and has given presentations at more than 125 colleges, universities, secondary schools, libraries, books, stories, churches, and community centers. And his landmark, which he let us know, I guess, about a month ago, he had hit his 100th country. That's a lot of countries. So, without any further ado, let brother come up and do what he's here to do. We are to always be informed by our ancestors, and here's a brother who can take us to ancestors all over the world that will inform us about who we are. Dr. Runoko Rashidi.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Hotep. It's a delight to be here. I want to thank everybody involved, the musicians, Dr. J, Brother Smalls. Of course, it wouldn't be possible without Nana Camille Yarborough and Ancestor House. I'm eternally grateful to you, to see many old friends, and I'm particularly delighted to see Mother Kefa Neptus, who means so much to so many of us. I could write a book about my history and relationship with her. For one thing, she's responsible for my first trip to Egypt. I think that was like 20 years ago. I've been going to Egypt 20 times now. So I've been very, very fortunate in the people that I've been able to interact with over the years. And I'm overcome by the enormity of what we do and, you know, the mission that our ancestors have handed down to us. And of course, this is a historic institution, so I'm very, very pleased to be here today. Now, we're already running out of time. There's never enough time. And so please don't tell me to take your time, Runoko, because that will get us put out in the street. What I want to do is show a lot of photographs. I want to illustrate all of the themes, all of the people that Dr. Jeffrey so generously talked about in bringing me up to the stage. I want to dedicate the presentation to Nana Camille and Mother Kefa. And with your permission, I'd like to begin the presentation. Do I have your permission to begin? Yes. Okay, I don't know if we want to turn some more of these lights out. They're a little bit bright. And I'm going to sit right here and just show you a lot of photographs. Okay. Now this, of course, is
Arthur Alfonso Schomberg, a legendary figure. I believe he was from Puerto Rico, and I've heard so many stories from Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark talking about this great man. Now, I'm going to go through these very, very quickly. I brought a bunch of photographs, and I don't want to miss any one. And then, of course, this is really nice picture of a young Langston Hughes. And Langston Hughes, of course, was a great poet. He does the poem in particular, I've Known Rivers, which I can really relate to. And it shows he had I guess you could say, an African-centered consciousness. He talked about the Congo, talked about the Nile, talked about the Tigris Euphrates. This is in the 1920s. So really a remarkable brother. But a lot of people don't know that he wrote two excellent autobiographies. The Big C, which is a good one, but another one, the title that I could easily, if my consciousness wasn't high, appropriate, and that is I Wonder as I Wander. And that really seems to fit me. Some people said he wandered more than he wondered, okay? But he really traveled around the entire world, and I salute him. And of course, this is a nice one of Donna Camille herself. A beautiful woman, beautifully garbed. Again, I'm going to go through these quickly. Now, I kind of want to do them in a kind of a sequential order. I want to start, I guess appropriately so, with the Nile Valley. So again, I'm going to go through these quickly. This is, I think I took this photograph myself, and I do take a degree of pride when I can say this is an original photograph. I took this. I didn't just get it from a book. This, of course, are two statues of Ramses the Great at Abu Simbel. And the sister down by his side, of course, he's always portrayed as larger than life. And this is the famous Nefertari. Here is an image of some Africans, and sometimes I think we're criticized because we don't talk about the rest of Africa enough. And of course, these are Cushites. A great one of Hormozket, the Great Sphinx. Do you know that originally this was brightly colored? Among other things, I think it was red, white, green, and blue. And there's a big argument now as to how old this actually is. Tony Browder and I were together in Washington, D.C. last night, and Tony's argument is that this is actually about 6,500 years old. And this is one of our greatest scholars and one of our most beloved ancestors, and this is Dr. Asa Grant Hilliard III, Nana Bafour. I miss Asa very much. I think of the scholars that I miss the most are John Henry Clark and Asa Hilliard, because they were more than scholars. They were like princes. And Asa was just a really nice brother, a very caring individual. Sometimes, you know, being a great scholar doesn't necessarily mean you're a nice guy. Some of the most rotten people I know are some of the most brilliant people that I know. But Asa was just a very warm, friendly, caring person. And I think that he, probably more than most people, personified the concept of ma'at. Sometimes we fall short on that. We're able to memorize vast passages in books, but sometimes we don't always embody those principles. I think Asa did a pretty good job of that. And he died in Kemet. These are just, this is from my favorite dynasty. This is Dynasty 12, and a nice one of the world's first large stone building. And then you can see how so much has been taken out of Africa. This is one of the Tekken, the obelisks of Ramses the Great, and you can see the Eiffel Tower in the background, so you know it's in Paris. And you ought to see it at night. It's really, really beautiful when it's lit up. And this is from the Temple of Luxor. And then, of course, this one right here. And what can you say about these that haven't already been said? They have been called miracles in stone. When the Arabs, who are Johnny-come-latelys to Africa, came in the 7th century, they were so impressed by these monuments, this one in particular, which is Khufu on the horizon, the Mir, the pyramid, also known as the Great Pyramid. They coined an expression that is worth repeating today, and that is, the world fears time, but time fears the pyramids. That's a pretty lofty statement. And then again, and here's Runoko Rashidi himself. I don't know who took this picture. I don't know precisely what tomb it is. I believe it's in one of the tombs of the nobles, and I'm inclined to say in Aswan, Egypt. And it's nice to see some people who traveled to Egypt with me. My dear sister Julia Loving and Sister Anna. This is just an image from out, and I have about 50,000 of these photographs now. And don't worry, I'm only going to show a couple hundred today. I'm not going to, but I would love to show all 50,000. You know, I should say lock the door and tell everybody there's a Rottweiler outside. If you go out before you see them all, you'll be terribly punished. This is just outside my hotel window on my recent trip to Egypt. I haven't been to Egypt that many times. I've only been to Egypt 22 times now. And I think if I went 22,000 times, I would still want to go back for more. And again, Mother Kefa is responsible for that. One Sunday afternoon, she called me and she says, Runoko, do you still want to go to Egypt? And I said, of course. And she said, do you have a passport? And I said, yeah. And she says, can you be ready in 2 weeks? I said, uh-huh. And I pinched myself. And I said, you're kidding, right? You're joking, right? And she said something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing now, I don't joke about Egypt. And so I said, what do I have to do? She said, you just have to go help Ashra Kwesi, help Dr. Ben. And that turned out to be my first trip, and it was a remarkable trip. There's nothing like the first time. And I remember being there, and Kwesi gave us an expression. He may have been pulling our legs, and he says the expression is, to drink of the Nile means you will always return. And so we got so carried away that we started drinking from the Nile. Now, at first we went in the middle of the river, you know, and then by the time the trip was over, we were so exuberant, we just drank from the bank of the river. We just got a bottle and dipped right in there. I told that to Dr. Ben. He said, boy, are you crazy? Anyway, this is in Aswan. All-seeing eye. Now here's a good one. Now on my last trip at Hormaki, the Great Sphinx, I ran into two different groups of black people with my own little tour group, and these are Darfurians. There were two newlywed couples, black people from Sudan, but specifically from Darfur. And we got to talking, and they were much more articulate in English than me, which is not saying a lot. Sometimes people say, Runoko, how many foreign languages do you speak? And I say, I speak a little bit of English. And so we got to talking, and you know what we spent most of the afternoon talking about? The legacy of Malcolm X. With these couples from Darfur. The pyramid ship of Khufu, and then this is the other group of Africans I met. Where do you think they're from? They're from Libya. And I said, oh, are you a part of because I haven't been to Libya yet. I was invited to Libya twice last year, but visa issues, and now who knows what will happen with that. So I asked them, are you recent to Libya? Have you just come? Because we hear so much about African migrants to Libya, African migrants to another part of Africa. And they said, oh no, we've been there for many generations. And it was just interesting that I met all of these sisters and brothers within a short space of time. I also have to acknowledge my sister, April Silva. We've talked a little bit on the phone, and we've sent emails, but sister, it's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for all you've done to pull this together. I do appreciate you. Okay, give this sister a round of applause if you would. Runoko, Rashidi, and the Tomb of Teti. Now this is a good one because this one has pyramid text. The pyramids on the Giza Plateau, there's nothing in there. All you'll be able to say is that you went in there. You went in the tomb, but there's nothing really to see. But here, by the time you get to the 5th and 6th dynasty, you have what are called the pyramid texts. And this one is big enough, the entrance, where you can climb down into without a lot of difficulty. And I even bribe the tomb attendants, because they're happy to get that money, believe me, to allowing us to do a libation ceremony in this pyramid. Karnak Temple. Here's a good one. This is for Sister Julia. This is the goddess Sheshat. She is identified as the world's first librarian. She is called the Mistress of the House of Books. Don't you love that title? The Mistress of the House of Books, and you can identify her as a black woman with the Sirius star over her head. And then this one just shows you that there's still black people running around Egypt today. And not all of them are Nubians, not all of them are Sudanese. But the African genetic material was so strong in Kemet that it still survives to some degree, especially around Luxor. And you see this little child on a white donkey. One of these children actually tried to take me up the side of a hill, a steep hill, mind you, on one of these. And it didn't work out very well. I ended up paying this little boy to let me off because I was terrified. God, Amen, from whom we derive the expression Amen. Here's an interesting one. This is a model of a glider. For a long time, it's been argued as to whether it was a glider or it was a model of a bird. So a team from NASA went and built a replica of it and flew it through the air and said it's just like a B-52. The reason it's so interesting is because this is missing now. This was one of the pieces in the Cairo Museum. You know, the Cairo Museum was ransacked to some extent, or put it this way, broken into during what they call the Egyptian Revolution of last year. Still interested to see what will be the outcome of that. And I was afraid, many of us, I'm sure, that some of the pieces, some of the more valuable pieces, were really going to be badly damaged or stolen. In fact, the mummies of the parents of Queen Tai were ripped up and destroyed. Those were indeed casualties. But this is another one that has disappeared, and nobody can seem to trace it. I suspect it was an inside job. Just a nice one of Amenhotep III, the husband of Queen Tai, the father of Akhenaten, and I believe the father of Tutankhamun. These are basic, I know. Living in New York, you know everything about Kemet, so just listen and pay attention for my sake. Act like you're interested for, to humor me, because this is a brief thing. This one is in Germany. If Europeans can't do anything else well, they can steal. They have excelled at theft. Nobody would dispute that, I'm sure. This was on the cover of one of the editions of George G.M. James's book, Stolen Legacy, published in the mid-1950s, and that's an interesting story, as you know, because Dr. James is supposed to have disappeared shortly after this book was published, Stolen Legacy, which argued that Greek philosophy is no such thing, but it's actually African philosophy that the Greeks stole. Now, interestingly enough, I got invited to do a presentation some years ago at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, HBCU, where Dr. James was teaching when the book came out. Do you know, and this probably won't shock you, but it will disappoint you, they don't even have a copy of Stolen Legacy in the library, in the HBCU. Some of these HBCUs, we must remember what they were established for. They were not designed as liberation vehicles, and some of them are even more conservative, I think, than some of the mainstream white institutions. Anyway, this is Khafra, pyramid from on top, Great Pyramid. This case holding these Kushite and Nubian soldiers was also broken into, but they were not damaged. My favorite pharaoh, this is Namare Amenhotep III from the 12th dynasty. This is a bad brother right here. And this is in the corner of the Cairo Museum. They don't even have a label on it. They've taken it off the main display corridor and put it around the corner, kind of like tucked away. So I found out where it was, and I make it a point. Every time I take a group there to, yes, Mother Calf, I actually take groups to Kemet now. I graduated a little bit. I want you to be proud of me. You know, there are certain people that we want to impress. There are certain people that we want to be proud of us, that we want to be able to say, we did all right. Are you pleased with that? Asa Hilliard and Dr. Clark were like that. If Dr. Ben were to come to a lecture, you would try to be especially good that day, because he might cuss you out anyway. But you wanted to be as good as you could. You wanted them to approve of you. Anyway, I always take my groups here. This is Amenhotep III, and I don't think you can get any more Africoid than this brother right here. And of course, this one is missing too. This is not in the museum anymore. At least it wasn't when I was there in July. And this is one of the daughters of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. I was honored on my last trip to have on my tour Dr. Abdul-Lahim Shabazz. He's the world's, I think, foremost mathematician, certainly the world's foremost African mathematician that I'm aware of. And I believe he's trained about half of the PhDs in mathematics African Americans in the United States. Bad brother, 84 years old, who told me a lot about the relationship between Malcolm X and Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You know, he spent a lot of time in the nation. He told me a lot about Malcolm's last days. And he told me something that I found very gratifying in many ways. It might sound warped, but to me it meant a lot. He says when Malcolm was assassinated, that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad broke down and cried like a baby. We are given the impression that the relationship between those two was so horrible, but that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad still held a degree of affection for Malcolm, and I think that that's important to acknowledge. And of course, Ramses the Great at Memphis, and Ramses the Great again, and the statue of Tutankhamun that you rarely get a chance to see. This is, reminds me of myself and my daughter. This is Cinnamont and Neferah, the daughter of Hatshepsut, and Queen Tai, and Dr. Clark in Aswan. I think this might have been the time around the time of the big ASCAD conference in what, 1987? I didn't go to that conference. I went to India that year, and everybody else went to Egypt. I was always odd. I always wanted to do something different. So when 1,000 of you all were in Nubia, I was in India doing my thing over there, having my life threatened over there. And this is a picture of Dr. Clark. Dr. Clark was a wonderful person, and he was the sort of person, you would know better than me, that he could just sit somewhere and people would start to gather, and he'd start to talk. And before you know it, there was a lecture going. Dr. Clark was the sort of person, and I bet many people could say this, he seemed to always have time for you. He never seemed to think that he was above you. Of course he was. I love that statement he makes that, what does he say? I only debate my peers, all others I teach. I think he told Martin Bernal or Cornel West or somebody. I like that. And it's getting to a point where I'm starting to use that a little bit more as I get older. Dr. Clark. And this is from the Temple of Kanambo, and this is Cleopatra VII. And recent excavations have shown that her mother, as I understand it, was a black woman. So we can call Cleo a sister now, for sure. Edfu Temple. Dendera Temple. And I think this might be the last one from Kemet, maybe one or two more, but I felt obliged to show these, also because I'm trying to promote my tour for next year. This is a very odd one, and this is from the Temple of Abydos, which is Dr. Ben's favorite temple. And what you have here, or what it appears, is the temple of Seti I and Ramses the Great. What appears to be a helicopter, and I don't know about this and I don't know about this, but this is 3,200 years ago. So, I mean, you know, what can you tell me now? The guides say that these are just badly damaged glyphs, but it looks, you know, pretty clear to me what they are, but that's speculation. Now let's move on. One more, the island of Philae, the island of love. And this is the temple of Aset, and then there's another temple of Het-Heru or Hathor, and these are Shawaptis of Taharqa. They put these in the tomb so that the deceased wouldn't have to do anything. Now let's see some other parts of Africa and the global African community. Of course, this is Kwame Nkrumah on Independence Day, March 6, 1957. Ghana is a wonderful place. And I remember the first time I went to Ghana, when I left, I actually cried. And Ghana is like that. To me, there are two places in Africa, if you don't go anywhere else, you should try to go to Egypt and Ghana. Because in Egypt and Kemet, you can see what we did. But in Ghana, you can see where you came from. And Dr. Clark used to say, Runoko, and Sister Sybil used to say the same thing, and said, you have to go in those dungeons. And I said, why do I have to go in those dungeons? But I went in there. And everybody, I suppose, reacts differently. I'm talking about Cape Coast, Elmina in particular. I guess everybody has a different reaction. Hope you don't see any white people that day. And especially hope you don't see any in the dungeons, because many of them don't get it. On one of my recent trips, I couldn't stand it. So I left the group inside. This is at the entrance of Elmina dungeon, the sanitized dungeon. And I'm outside minding my own business, I guess you could say grieving. A little white girl, had to be about 20 years old, came up to me with her Asian boyfriend with a big smile, and they said, sir, since you're not doing anything, would you mind taking a picture of us? Why did they say that? So that was an incident, right? That could have been an international incident. Anyway, Kwame Nkrumah, one of our greatest leaders, who used to say the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless tied to the independence and the unification of all Africa. And Africans all over the world had to participate in that process. Do you know that Chancellor Williams was at that independence ceremony, the author of Destruction of Black Civilization? Do you know Martin Luther King was at that ceremony, and Coretta Scott King was with him too? A lot of people don't know that. That Dr. King went to Africa more than once. All right. Nigeria. Nigerians like to say, if you haven't been to Africa, you haven't been to Nigeria. And I went to Nigeria twice last year. And this sweet-looking little Nubian girl, doesn't she look sweet? Well, she wasn't sweet. And I bought a little doll from her that I later found out was made in China. Gave her $10 because she looked so sweet. And then she got mad at me because I wouldn't buy one from her mother for $10. So her whole demeanor changed. She started making fun of my bald head. She started making fun of my bow legs. And I really contemplated child murder for a short time. I'm thinking, we're right next to the Nile. I wonder what her swimming abilities are. Anyway, I expect to run into her again one day. Ghana, Morocco. Here's a nice one. Billie Holiday, Lady Day, holding this, I think it's a Nigerian piece. Southern Ethiopia, strange fruit. India. These are poor women from Senegal. Moses, the Ethiopian saint. Darfurians, Cubans, or Africans in Cuba. This brother is from, he's from a community called the Jawara, J-A-R-A-W-A, in the Indian Ocean. And they are very much endangered. Australia, Aboriginal Australian elders, the most spiritual people I've ever encountered. India, Solomon Islands. Now here you see the whole range. You see the straight blonde hair and the frizzy blonde hair, and they're not considered unusual in any way. They're just another part of the community. As an anthropologist, I think I'm an anthropologist and a historian, I'm fascinated by their hair. I've seen people with bright orange hair. I've seen black people with naturally red hair. And I never quite get enough of it. And they just laugh at me. They think, you know, this man must really be crazy. They must ask themselves, are all African Americans as crazy as this man? Australia, Djibouti in the Horn of Africa. We don't hear much about that country, do we? I say that to the children, Djibouti, and they just laugh. These are some fine sisters right here from Niger. And these are beautiful women. I met a group of them in Niger. I almost didn't leave. Okay. Oman in the Persian Gulf. Sierra Leone. Kenya. Liberia. Mauritania, which just abolished slavery in the 1980s. Runoko Rashidi with a brother from Southern Sudan, Africa's newest independent nation. And I hung out with a group of these brothers. Here I am lecturing at the University of Juba in Southern Sudan, and I kept telling them, I'm so envious of you. I wish I was that black. And they said, well, just come and stay for about 1,000 years, and, you know, maybe, if you get lucky. It's nice to be around people who think black complexion people have fair skin. Because
tell it. We must learn and tell our story, heal the pain and raise the glory. Tell it. We must learn and tell our story, heal the pain and raise the glory. Tell it. Not to know the family story is bad. Not to want to know it is worse. But to pass on ignorance to someone is it's like passing on a curse. And it will curse your father, curse your mother, curse your sister, curse your brother. And every time you come...
Hmm.